Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am ridiculously excited to show you this card today. I have postponed all other videos and editing so that I could hurry up and show you this one because I think it is probably my favourite card that I have ever made and probably one of the most well-made cards in my collection. So let's jump right into it and I'll show you what I used to make this card. I'm loving this paper pad by Amy Tangerine. All of these papers are fantastic for backgrounds, which is great if you don't have time to do an ink blended background. These pattern papers are just really cute. I used the Let's Go Nuts stamp set, the Big Acorn mini stamp set, a few pieces from the Den Sweet Den, and this little couch that I found that someone had shared in the Lawn Fawn Addicts group. I'm also using my stitched dens and these old frames that I've had for a couple of years. As with every beginning of a card, I stamp out my images. I'm using just some plain black ink for this, and I don't show it in my videos, but I do stamp these twice so that my images are nice and clear. As you can see, I've got a bunch of squirrels, I've got that big acorn, a few pieces of furniture, a Christmas tree, a big ribbon, and a box. I also stamp out a bunch of little acorns, but I don't show that. And on the box, I put this side up. So the whole story behind this one is that a parcel with a giant acorn has been sent to these little squirrels. So the box has this side up and the ribbon is to make it, I guess, look like a present. I kept my paper pad and the colour that I was going to use for the background close by me while I coloured in so that I could tie all these colours together. I do tend to go overboard with my colours every now and then, so I'm trying to use just a few colours that all complement each other nicely. So let's get on to colouring. I won't show you how I coloured every squirrel because they're all the same, even though the colours are a little bit different. I always use two markers, either Copics or alcohol markers. I colour it in with one colour and then I go over where I think there would be shadow with a darker marker and then back in with that light one to blend them out. After that, I then add some white details. They just seem to bring a bit more dimension to all of these characters. Now that they're all coloured in, I'll show you what I did for a few other details in this card. Using my stitch frame, I cut out a piece of cardstock so that I knew how big the inside of that was going to be. I didn't want the added stitched details on this one. I just wanted to stick a plain piece behind it. So here I am just going around it with a pen a little bit bigger than that rectangle so that this will adhere nicely onto the back of the frame. This technique that I used here didn't really work. I was trying to erase the face of the little squirrel. I know that sounds a little bit strange, but I wanted to put a different face on him. So I used a cotton bud for that and it really didn't work. So I didn't show what I did in the end, just what didn't work. And what I did was I used just a tiny piece of card to block out the piece of his face that I didn't want, but I'm just showing you what I was trying to go for. This cute little face that I did use on this squirrel was from the Be Happy stamp set. He looks so cute with those little glasses. To do my sentiment for this one, I loaded up my banner with heaps of that anti-static powder. And this sentiment was a little bit tricky because it had lots of words from lots of different stamp sets. Because, let's face it, this sentiment is a little bit cheeky. From our nut house to yours, I can tell you now it accurately describes my house. So I had to use a few different stamp sets for this. I got some of the words from Winter Village, some from, I think it's Happy Village, the word nuts from the Big Acorn set, and I think the word house was from the Spooky Village. So those village stamp sets really came in handy for this. A big thank you to a lovely lady named Jennifer in the Lawn Fawn Attic group who came up with this sentiment. As soon as I saw it, I knew I had to turn the sentiment into a scene and base a whole card around it. It reminds me of a very funny scene in the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation where the main character has a bit of a moment and the word nut house does come up, as well as a whole bunch of other not so appropriate words, and I just find it really funny because that movie is the movie we watch every Christmas Eve, so that that particular scene always gives us a good giggle, and to have a card that kind of ties in with that is just so funny. So as you can see, I'm stamping all of these words out, and I'm doing this one piece at a time so that I don't ruin my embossing ink or knock my powder off. So once I stamp one, I cover it in embossing powder, and then I take it over to my heat tool, I heat it up, and then move on to the next word. And I'm just using a piece of excess cardstock here to cover up the words where I don't want that ink to overlap. Unfortunately, this banner was just a little bit too small for my sentiment, so I had to put one word on top of the other here. I feel like it kind of matches the whole scene though. Everything's a little bit chaotic and my words are all over the place. So on to the rest of the card. For my card front, I cut a piece of brown cardstock, rounded the edges and used the biggest of the stitched ends to cut out the hole in the middle. I then used a piece of black craft foam and made it just a little bit smaller than that brown cardstock so that it would sit behind it nicely without being seen. I then cut the same size stitched end so that it would fit perfectly behind it. Using some really strong double-sided tape, I put that all over this piece of foam so that it would adhere perfectly to my cardstock. I had considered using PVA glue for this step, but the amount that I would have to use would probably warp my cardstock. Something that I really like about this card is that when you hold it in your hands, it's nice and thick because of all of the added dimension, but it's not too heavy and bulky because the foam was really light. It just feels really well made. I think that's one of the reasons why this is probably one of my favourite cards I've ever made. Everything about it just feels really even and neat. I used one of the papers from that paper pad for my background. I really like these little dots. I feel like it looks like wallpaper. And then I just used some plain brown cardstock for my floors. It was now time to put my whole scene together. When I saw the little squirrels and their rake, I couldn't help but think of that old painting with the two farmers outside their farmhouse holding the pitchfork. So that's what that little photo is based on. I just love that little squirrel and his excitement over that acorn arriving in the mail. He is just so cute. And I love the little one running on the outside like he's got the zoomies. It's just adorable. Just before I adhere that den frame around this whole scene, I added a few little acorns throughout the house and to decorate their Christmas tree. To tie my sentiment in with the rest of the card, I cut a slightly bigger banner in the same paper that I used for the background of this card. And then I layered them on top of each other before putting some foam squares behind it and layering it on the front. I wanted to add a sentiment on the inside of this card, but I decided to keep it super simple, so all I used was a scripty Merry Christmas, and then I placed a tiny little acorn next to it so that it matched the scene on the front. It was then just a matter of adhering that entire card front onto the card base. And there we have it. The card is complete. Let me know what your favourite bit about this card is in the comments. I'm having a really hard time choosing between the excited little squirrel, the portrait in the background, and the little dude with the zoomies. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to see more of my work. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.